Have you ever looked back after someone has died and wondered, why didn't I grieve then? Maybe you were the one making the phone calls, planning the funeral, signing paperwork, looking after the children, making sure everyone else was okay. Maybe you were told to be strong. Maybe someone changed the subject whenever you mentioned your person who died. You tucked it away because life or the people around you made you feel like there wasn't room for it. And then months or even years later, it came rushing back. If that's what happened to you, there's nothing wrong with you. Today, we're talking about suffocated grief. It sounds exactly like what it is. We'll talk about why it happens, what it looks like, and how you can begin making room for the grief that may have been silenced for a very long time. I have spent years sitting with individuals and families in hospice and bereavement. And the one thing that I've learned is that not everyone gets the opportunity to grieve when the loss actually happens. Sometimes grief doesn't get the chance to breathe, not because we didn't love our person, not because the relationship we had with them didn't matter. It was because survival came first. Think about the mother whose partner dies, still has children to feed, lunches to pack, bills to pay, a mortgage, school drop-offs, homework. People depend on her. There may not be room for her to completely fall apart, even if that is exactly what her body really wants to do. Or think about the adult son whose father dies. Suddenly, he's arranging the funeral, helping his mother, handling the estate, cleaning out the house, and answering everyone's questions. He's running on adrenaline. He tells himself, I'll deal with how I feel later. And sometimes that later doesn't come for months. Sometimes it doesn't come for years. This is one way grief can become suffocated. The grief is still there, but it's being pushed beneath responsibilities, expectations, and the need to just keep functioning when other people muffle our grief. But sometimes grief isn't pushed down because life is busy. Sometimes it's pushed down because someone else makes us feel like our grief is just too much. Imagine the person that you love just died in a hospital room. You cry out, not because you're trying to make a scene, not because you've lost control in some inappropriate way, but because that sound might come from a place so deep inside you that you didn't even know existed. And then someone says, can you keep it down? Or the door is quietly closed. Or you're reminded that there are other patients nearby. And trust me, I understand that hospitals, hospices are really busy places. Healthcare workers are just trying to care for so many people at once. I was that person. I have worked in that environment for years, so I completely get it. There are practical realities, other patients, families, and so many competing needs. But that grieving person's body may not understand those practical realities in that moment. And what they may hear is, you're too loud. You're making people uncomfortable. Please grieve differently. And in that moment, they may swallow something that desperately needed to come out. That doesn't only happen in hospitals. It also happens when someone is told they're crying too much, when people stop asking how they are because the answer makes them uncomfortable, when they're told they need to stay strong for the children, when friends say, it's time that you move forward. But when the person's name is avoided because other people think that mentioning them will make things worse, little by little, the grieving person may stop expressing what they're feeling at all. Not because the grief has become smaller, but because they have learned that their grief is not welcome. When someone's world has just fallen apart, the last thing they should have to worry about is whether they are grieving too loudly. Our brains and bodies are incredibly protective. When something is too overwhelming to process all at once, the nervous system may focus on survival. It's almost as though your brain says, not now, we have things to do. We'll come back to this later. And in the moment, that can actually be really helpful. It allows you to make the phone calls, get through the funeral, care for your children, return to work, make decisions that you never want to make. And sometimes our minds place grief on a shelf temporarily, not because we're trying to erase it, but because we need to remain functional. We still need to do some adulting. The difficulty is that grief cannot stay on that shelf forever. It waits. And when it becomes quieter, or when something else reminds us of the person who died, that grief might finally ask to be felt. And that's not your body betraying you. It may be your body finally deciding that it is safe enough to let some of that pain come forward. So suffocated grief can be difficult to recognize because it doesn't always look like sadness or crying. Sometimes it looks like exhaustion that just never seems to go away. Irritability over the smallest things, screaming at somebody on the road while you're driving or in the grocery store because they cut you off. Anxiety, difficulty concentrating, feeling disconnected from other people, emotional numbness, keeping yourself constantly busy, avoiding quiet moments because that's when the brain really likes to think about things because you're finally giving it the time and the space to do that. Losing interest in things that you once enjoyed, or suddenly becoming emotional over something that seems completely unrelated. Someone might begin crying at the grocery store because they see their person's favorite cereal. They may smell a familiar cologne or perfume when someone walks past them. A song may be played in a restaurant. Maybe they'll find an old voicemail, a handwritten note, or a birthday card tucked away in a drawer. And suddenly that grief feels as though it has come out of nowhere, but it didn't come out of nowhere. The cereal wasn't really the problem. The song wasn't the problem. The moment simply opened a door that had been held shut for a very long time. Suffocated grief might also show up during retirement, after the children move out, when caregiving responsibilities finally end, after another death or an anniversary, or during a quiet weekend when life slows down enough for the feelings to catch up. I'll tell you a story about a client that I had not too long ago. Her husband passed away, and as we were talking about her loss of her husband, she mentioned that she started thinking about her father a lot, and she started being really sad, but she's like, I don't understand. He died 30 years ago. But as we started talking, when he died, she was pregnant with her first baby, and she gave birth to her baby like right after he died. So of course, being a new mom, the hormones and busyness and caring for another human took over, and eventually time went on. The baby grew a little older. She had her second, school, responsibilities, adulting, all that went on. And she never really fully grieved her father when he died because it was just before her baby was born. But now that she's grieving her husband's death, all of that is coming back. It's almost like a little Pandora's box that opens up. So people often say, I thought I was past this. But grief is not a stage that we pass and never return to. Sometimes your grief is not returning. Sometimes it's finally given the space to actually speak and be heard. I remember speaking with someone whose mother had died. She didn't cry at the funeral, not once. Everyone kept telling her how strong she was. So she continued being strong. She became the organizer, the person who checked on everyone else, the person who handled what needed to be handled. Years later, she was cleaning out a kitchen drawer and found one of her mother's handwritten recipe cards, complete with splatter from the recipe that had been used for years and years. It wasn't a long letter. It wasn't a treasured family document. It was just a recipe in her mother's handwriting. She sat down on the kitchen floor and cried harder than she had cried since the death of her mother. And she kept asking, what is wrong with me? Why is this happening now? There was nothing wrong with her. Her grief had not suddenly appeared. It had been there all along. It had simply been waiting until she had enough time, space, and safety to really feel it. So many people mistake delayed emotion for failed grieving. They're not the same thing. If you recognize yourself in this, please don't feel like you have to force your grief to come out. You don't have to make yourself cry. You don't have to relive every single painful moment. And you don't have to prove how much you loved your person who died. Instead, just begin gently. Try becoming curious about what's happening inside you. Notice when your emotions appear. Notice what memories come forward in your mind. Notice what happens in your body when you slow down. You might give yourself 5 quiet minutes without trying to accomplish anything. You might write about what you remember. You might go for a walk and allow your thoughts to wander. You might listen to music that connects you to your person. You might look through photographs if it feels supportive rather than overwhelming. You might talk to someone who can listen without trying to fix you, rush you, or make your grief smaller. And sometimes it might help to simply say, I think my grief's asking for my attention today. You don't need to deal with everything at once. You can let grief come out in small pieces. You can return to it another day. And if your grief feels overwhelming, frightening, or difficult to carry alone, you might want to talk to a bereavement counselor, therapist, grief group, or any trusted professional. If there's one thing that I hope you remember from this video, it's this. Just because you continued functioning doesn't mean you were suffering. And because your grief is arriving months or years later doesn't mean you're going backwards. It might simply mean that your heart and your body are finally ready to carry what they could not carry before. If this video resonated with you, I would love to hear from you in the comments. You're not alone. I guarantee it. Thank you for spending these few minutes with me. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself, and you are welcome to come and grieve with me anytime.